The wind whipped around me, cold and unforgiving, just like the world had become. Or maybe it had always been this way, and I'd just been too naive to see it. Standing on the ledge of my apartment building, 32 floors above the indifferent city, the ground looked a lifetime away. It was, wasn't it? A lifetime. Mine, to be exact. My name, Sarah Chen, felt like a whisper on the wind, already fading. Brilliant, they used to say. Underappreciated, I knew. Software engineer. That's what my resume said. That's what I was. Or had been. The flashback hit me with the force of a physical blow, sending a fresh wave of nausea through my already reeling senses. Earlier today, just hours ago, really, the sterile, soulless meeting room at Technova, the forced sympathy in HR's eyes, the carefully chosen, utterly false words, uncois, underperformance. Underperformance. Me? The one who'd poured her soul into every line of code? The one who'd built their revolutionary AI algorithm? The one they were already heralding as the next big thing? No, not their algorithm, my algorithm, but Vanessa Blake, my team lead, my mentor, or so I'd thought. She'd made sure everyone believed it was hers. She'd stood there beside the HR drone, a picture of concerned leadership while they gutted my career. Her voice, usually so smooth and persuasive, had dripped with false regret as she agreed with their assessment. Sarah has struggled to keep pace, she'd said, her eyes avoiding mine. It wasn't the first time. Oh God, it wasn't the first time. It was a pattern, a sick, twisted dance of workplace theft and gaslighting that I'd been too trusting, too focused on the work to see until it was too late. Vanessa would praise my ideas in private, encourage me to develop them, then present them as her own in meetings I was conveniently uninvited to. Little things at first, a clever function, a unique approach to a problem. Then bigger things, entire modules. And now this. My masterpiece, the culmination of years of research and relentless effort. My phone, clutched in my numb hand, buzzed. Habit, more than anything, made me glance at the screen. A news alert. Technova's Vanessa Blake secures $50 million funding round for groundbreaking AI innovation. $50 million for her innovation, my innovation. A bitter laugh, or maybe it was a sob, escaped my lips. The sound was snatched away by the wind. It was too much. The injustice of it all, the sheer crushing weight of it, was a physical force. I swayed, a dizzying lurch. The city lights blurred, then sharpened with a terrifying clarity. Despair. It wasn't a gentle fall into sadness, it was a violent shove. My foot slipped. There was no conscious decision, no dramatic leap, just an imbalance, a loss of equilibrium in a world that had already tipped me on my side. The air rushed past me, a deafening roar. Time stretched, then compressed. In that horrifying, suspended moment, one thought, crystal clear, burned through the panic. If only I could do it all over again. Then, nothing. I woke up gasping, a scream trapped in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs like a wild bird trying to escape a cage. The rough fabric of a familiar, slightly scratchy comforter was tangled around my legs. My old apartment. Not the sleek, minimalist place I'd upgraded to after 2 years at Technova, but my first solo place, the one with the temperamental radiator and the view of a brick wall. A vivid nightmare, I thought, shuddering. The most terrifying, realistic nightmare of my life. The fall. I could still feel the phantom sensation of rushing air. I sat up, my body slick with sweat, my breath coming in ragged bursts. The room was dim, the early morning light filtering weakly through the blinds. Something was wrong, more wrong than just a bad dream. The air smelled different, the quality of the light. It was a light I hadn't seen in years, not since... My eyes darted around the room. My old, battered laptop sat on the rickety desk in the corner. The poster of an obscure indie band, one I'd long since taken down, was tacked to the wall. A pile of textbooks I'd sworn I'd sell but never had sat gathering dust on the bookshelf. No, this wasn't right. My hand, trembling, fumbled for my phone on the nightstand. Not my sleek new model, but an older one. My old one. I thumbed it on, the screen flickering to life. The date, January 15th, 2020. My breath hitched. 2020, 5 years. 5 years in the past. It wasn't a nightmare, or if it was one I was still living. No, 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 I whispered, shaking my head, willing the numbers on the screen to change to make sense. But they remained stubbornly fixed. January 15th, 2020, 1 week. Exactly 1 week before I was scheduled to start my new job at Technova. 1 week before I would first meet Vanessa Blake. A second chance. The words echoed in my mind, a faint, unbelievable whisper against the roaring terror. My last thought. If only I could do it all over again. Had something, heard me? I scrambled out of bed, my legs unsteady. I had to confirm it. This couldn't be real. I rushed to the window, yanking up the blinds. The street below was familiar, yet older. The cars were different models. The coffee shop on the corner had a different name, the one it had before it became Artisanal Brews. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, younger, a little less worn, without the faint lines of stress and disillusionment that had begun to etch themselves around my eyes in the future. I began to test my memories. The news headlines from this week in 2020, I remembered them vaguely. Political squabbles, a brewing global health concern that no one was taking seriously enough yet. I checked online. It all matched. This wasn't a delusion. This was real. And then the most staggering realization hit me. My knowledge, I still had it, all of it. The 5 years of experience, the projects I'd worked on, the mistakes I'd made, the breakthroughs I'd achieved, the algorithm. My revolutionary AI algorithm. The one I wouldn't officially develop for another 3 years in the original timeline. I stumbled back to my old desk, my fingers trembling so violently I could barely control them. I pulled the laptop towards me, flipped it open. It whirred to life, slower than I was used to. A relic from a bygone era, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. Could I do it? Could I recreate it from memory? Years of complex code, intricate logic. I closed my eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and began to type. The code flowed from my fingertips, lines and functions appearing on the screen as if by magic. My mind was a steel trap, holding every nuance, every carefully crafted piece of logic. It was there, all of it, intact. Hours later, the first core components of the algorithm were humming on my old machine, a ghostly echo of a future yet to be. I leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. The terror was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but now it was mingled with something else, a fierce, burning resolve. I wasn't just going to survive this time. I wasn't just going to avoid Vanessa's treachery. I wanted justice. I wanted recognition. And maybe I wanted more. I grabbed a notepad and a pen, the old-fashioned tools feeling strangely appropriate for this journey back in time. I started to create a timeline, meticulously jotting down everything I remembered about how events had unfolded the first time around. Key projects at Technova, Vanessa's gradual, insidious takeover of my work. The colleagues who had been her enablers, whether knowingly or not. The ones who had also been her victims. Vanessa. I made a list of her manipulative techniques. The charm that disarmed, the subtle digs that undermined, the way she'd isolate you, praise you in private to gain your trust, then throw you under the bus in public. I'd been so blind, so focused on the purity of the work, the elegance of the code. I hadn't understood the game she was playing, the game of corporate politics, a game I was now, unwillingly, an expert in. I remembered how Marcus Wright, the founder and CEO of Technova, had eventually fired me. He was a visionary, a brilliant mind in his own right, but he was also distant, relying heavily on his senior leadership. He'd fired me based almost entirely on Vanessa's carefully constructed narrative of my underperformance, on her negative reviews and whispered concerns. He'd never bothered to look deeper. He'd never seen my brilliance, and this time he would. My plan began to form, no longer just about self-preservation. It was about flipping the script. I wouldn't just protect my work, I would showcase it, irrefutably. I wouldn't just avoid Vanessa's traps, I would expose her. And I wouldn't just survive Technova, I would conquer it. The plan was meticulous, layered. Document everything, every line of code, every idea, every conversation. Create undeniable proof of authorship. Protect my work with digital watermarks, private repositories, timestamps. Gather allies, people Vanessa had wronged, people who were smart enough to see through her facade if they were only given a nudge. And the ultimate goal, not just to get Vanessa fired. That would be too easy, too small. I wanted Technova. The thought was audacious, terrifying, exhilarating. To take control of the very company that had discarded me. To build it into something better, something that valued true innovation and ethical conduct. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had been to hell and back and who was ready to drag her demons into the light. Vanessa Blake, I thought, you have no idea what's coming for you. Walking into the Technova offices a week later felt like stepping onto a movie set where I knew everyone's lines. The sleek, modern lobby, the buzz of hushed conversations, the oversized company logo glowing on the far wall. It was all exactly as I remembered from my first day 5 years ago. But this time, I wasn't the naive, eager-to-please newcomer. I was a predator in familiar hunting grounds. My confidence was a shield, forged in the fires of future betrayal. I saw everything through experienced eyes. The subtle undercurrents of competitiveness masked by forced smiles. The way certain people gravitated towards power, their laughter a little too loud when a senior manager walked by. Red flags I'd been utterly oblivious to the first time. The company culture, which I'd once seen as dynamic and innovative, now looked performative. A breeding ground for the Vanessas of the world. Sarah Chen? The receptionist, a young woman whose name I now recalled was Chloe, looked up with a polite smile. "That's me," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. As I waited for HR to fetch me, my gaze swept the open plan office. And then I saw him. Dev Patel, my old friend. My brilliant, kind, funny colleague. The one who, in my previous timeline, had died in a horrific car accident just 2 years after I'd joined Technova. His death had been a brutal blow, another dark mark in a series of them. He was laughing, leaning over a colleague's desk, his dark eyes sparkling with humor. Alive. Vibrantly. Wonderfully alive. An overwhelming wave of emotion washed over me. Grief, relief, a fierce, protective urge. Before I could think, I was moving. "Dev!" He turned, a questioning look on his face. He didn't know me yet. We hadn't been introduced. I didn't care. I threw my arms around him, hugging him tightly, burying my face in his shoulder. Tears pricked my eyes. He smelled of coffee and something uniquely Dev, a scent I'd thought I'd never experience again. Then he stiffened in surprise, then awkwardly patted my back. Hi, do I know you?" I pulled back, mortified, but also undeniably moved. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I stammered, wiping my eyes. You remind me so much of an old friend, a very dear friend." He looked understandably confused, a little wary, but his natural kindness shone through. "Oh, well, nice to meet you." Sarah Chen, I'm new." "Dev Patel, welcome to Technova." He offered a hesitant smile. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. It's really good to be here." "More than you know, Dev, more than you'll ever know, and this time, I'm going to make sure you stay." The HR representative arrived then, a cheerful woman named Linda, and whisked me away for orientation. But as I walked off, I felt Dev's curious gaze on my back. My resolve, already strong, hardened into something unbreakable. I wasn't just doing this for myself. I was doing this for Dev too. And for everyone else who deserved better. Later that day, after the mind-numbing onboarding sessions, I was shown to my new desk. It was in the same open plan area, a few pods down from where I'd sat in my previous life. I settled in, the familiar hum of the office a backdrop to the storm brewing inside me. Then the email landed in my inbox. Subject: Welcome new team member. It was from Vanessa Blake, team lead AI development. She was officially transferring from the New York office today. She'd be by to introduce herself this afternoon. Showtime. I was pretending to be engrossed in a technical manual, my senses on high alert, when I felt the shift in the atmosphere. A subtle hush, a turning of heads. Vanessa Blake had arrived. She was exactly as I remembered, tall, impeccably dressed in a sharp, tailored suit that Probably cost more than my first month's rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, emphasizing her striking features. She moved with an air of effortless confidence, a predatory grace that was both alluring and intimidating. The charisma was undeniable. It practically radiated from her. And I, in my previous life, had fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. She paused at the entrance to our section, her eyes scanning the faces, a welcoming smile playing on her lips. The smile that could charm the birds from the trees, or a viper from its basket. Then, her gaze landed on me. The smile widened, became more focused, more assessing. She glided over, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Sarah Chen, I presume? I'm Vanessa Blake. Welcome to the team. I'm so thrilled to have you." Her voice was warm, inviting, like honeyed poison. I stood, taking her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Vanessa, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard great things about your work in the New York office." A lie, of course. In my future knowledge, her New York tenure was marked by a string of projects that had mysteriously stalled, only for her to emerge with a few key insights that others had toiled over. "Oh, you're too kind," she demurred, a flicker of something surprise in her eyes. I hadn't gushed, I hadn't seemed intimidated. That wasn't in the script she expected. "I'm really looking forward to diving in," I continued, keeping my tone professional, friendly, but with an undercurrent of quiet competence. "The AI projects here at Technova are cutting edge. It's what drew me to the company." "Indeed," Vanessa said, her smile tightening almost imperceptibly. This was where she usually established dominance, the subtle put-down, the assertion of her superior knowledge or experience. "It's a fast-paced environment. Some find it challenging to keep up." A pause, letting the implication hang in the air. In my first life, I'd probably mumbled something about being a hard worker, eager to learn. This Sarah didn't. "Challenges are what make it interesting," I replied smoothly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I'm confident I can contribute meaningfully from day one." A beat of silence. I saw it. The slight narrowing of her eyes, the almost microscopic twitch at the corner of her mouth. Confusion. I wasn't playing the part of the easily cowed newcomer. She recovered quickly, her charismatic mask snapping back into place. "Excellent. That's the spirit we like to see. I'm sure we'll achieve great things together." Together. The word dripped with unspoken assumptions of her leadership, my subservience. "I have a few preliminary ideas on the Project Chimera dataset, actually," I said, deliberately dropping the name of a key upcoming initiative. "Some thoughts on optimizing the learning models. Perhaps we could discuss them when you're settled in." This time, the surprise was undeniable. Project Chimera was still in its early stages. My knowing about it in detail, let alone having ideas, was unexpected. I was planting seeds, showing my technical acumen, but framing it as collaborative, non-threatening. Presenting myself as a potential ally, not direct competition. My long game had begun. "Of course," Vanessa said, her voice a little cooler now. "I'd be interested to hear them." She held my gaze for a moment longer, a silent battle of wills I hadn't even known existed the first time around. Then, with another perfectly executed smile, she turned to greet another team member. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Round one to me. But this was just the opening move in a very long, very dangerous chess game. And Vanessa Blake was a grand master of manipulation. I couldn't afford a single misstep. The next few weeks, I was a whirlwind of perfectly normal, highly productive activity on the surface. Inside, I was a meticulous archivist of my own burgeoning intellectual property. My plan hinged on irrefutable proof, and I was leaving nothing to chance. Every line of code I wrote for Technova projects, and for the nascent stages of my own refined algorithm that I worked on during my own time, was embedded with hidden, almost invisible watermarks. Tiny, unique identifiers, comments in dead code sections, subtle variations in naming conventions that only I would recognize, but that could be forensically verified. I set up private GitHub repositories, time-stamped and version-controlled. Every significant contribution, every innovative snippet was committed with precise, descriptive messages. My personal laptop, the one I'd brought from my past life, figuratively speaking, became my secret vault. Conversations with Vanessa were a different challenge. I couldn't exactly walk around with a recorder playing, not without raising immediate suspicion. But California, where Technova's main office was located, was a two-party consent state for recording conversations. So, for now, it was detailed, immediate note-taking. After every significant interaction with her, especially those where ideas were discussed, I'd retreat to my desk or the restroom and type up a verbatim account, emailing it to a private secure address, creating a contemporaneous record. The subject lines were innocuous: meeting notes, project thoughts. The contents were my armor, paper trails. For every task, every piece of research, every contribution to a team project, I made sure there was an email, a Jira ticket, a Slack message that clearly attributed the work or the initial idea to me. If Vanessa assigned me a task verbally, I'd follow up with an email. Vanessa, just to confirm our conversation, I'll be focusing on X, Y, and Z for the project Chimera pre-processing. I'll aim to have a draft by EOD Tuesday. Polite, professional, and utterly damning in its clarity. I was building a fortress of evidence, brick by painstaking brick. In my previous life, my trust had been my undoing. This time, my paranoia was my greatest asset. Vanessa's MO wasn't just to steal credit. It was to isolate her targets and manipulate the perceptions of those around them. I knew I couldn't fight her alone. I needed allies. Not an army, just a few key people, strategically positioned, who had also felt the sting of Vanessa's ambition, or who were simply too good at their jobs to be ignored for long. First on my list was Liam Johnson. He was an infrastructure specialist, quiet, almost painfully shy, but an absolute wizard with server architecture and deployment pipelines. In my previous timeline, Vanessa had constantly belittled his contributions, dismissed his concerns about scalability, and then, when his meticulously designed systems kept everything running smoothly under pressure, she'd taken the credit for her foresight in building a robust backend. Liam had eventually quit, disillusioned and underappreciated. I started by seeking his advice genuinely. Liam, I'm a bit new to Technova's deployment environment. Could you walk me through the best practices for staging the new NLP module? He was hesitant at first, unused to being directly consulted by a developer on my team. But when he saw I was actually listening, taking notes, asking intelligent follow-up questions, he opened up. He was brilliant and starved for professional respect. I made sure to publicly acknowledge his help in team meetings. Thanks to Liam's guidance on the server config, we managed to cut down the processing time by 15%. Little things, but they mattered. He started to trust me. Then there was Maya Rodriguez, a UI designer with an incredible eye for user experience and a portfolio of innovative ideas that, I recalled, Vanessa had systematically borrowed and presented as her own. Maya was more outspoken than Liam, but her frustrations were usually dismissed as not being a team player, a classic Vanessa tactic to silence dissent. I found Maya in the break room, sketching furiously in a notebook. "That looks incredible, Maya," I said, genuinely impressed by the wireframe. "Is that for the new dashboard interface?" She looked up, surprised. "Oh, yeah, just some initial thoughts." "The way you've integrated the anomaly detection alerts is really intuitive," I commented, pointing to a specific element. "It's much cleaner than the current proposal." A spark of pleasure quickly doused by caution. "Thanks, but Vanessa has other ideas." "Well, your ideas are solid," I said, keeping my voice low. "Make sure you document them. Date your sketches, keep your files well organized. Good ideas are worth protecting." I didn't mention Vanessa by name, didn't hint at my foreknowledge. Just a gentle, supportive warning. She gave me a long, searching look, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right." And finally, Jason Kim, the VP of Engineering. He was a good man, a sharp engineer himself, but he was also overburdened and, in my previous timeline, completely snowed by Vanessa's charm and her carefully curated image of competence. He wasn't a target for alliance in the same way, but someone whose eyes I needed to subtly open. My strategy with him was to consistently deliver exceptional work, meticulously documented, and to always be the voice of calm, data-driven reason in meetings. I wanted to become indispensable, a source of reliable, verifiable results. I started having informal coffee chats with these individuals, building genuine rapport. I'd listen to their frustrations, offer quiet support, and subtly encourage them to safeguard their own contributions. You know, I'd say to Liam over lukewarm coffee, your optimization ideas for the database queries are really smart. You should write those up in a clear proposal with benchmarks. Management loves benchmarks. A trusted network. It wasn't about forming a rebellion. It was about creating a silent consensus, a group of people who, when the time came, would have their own reasons to doubt Vanessa's narrative and to recognize the truth. The seeds of her downfall were being sown, not by my direct accusations, but by empowering others to see and protect their own light. While my days were a carefully orchestrated performance of a competent collaborative team member at Technova, my nights belonged to the algorithm, my true algorithm. Not the one I was slowly, meticulously redeveloping for Technova, but the advanced, refined version that existed only in my memory and on my personal, heavily encrypted laptop. This was where my future knowledge was a superpower. The original algorithm, the one Vanessa had stolen, had been revolutionary. But with the insights and experience of an additional 3 years of development that I now possessed, I could make it even better. I worked with a feverish intensity, fueled by caffeine and a burning desire for vindication. The code I wrote now was leaner, more efficient, more powerful. I incorporated error-handling routines I'd only figured out after painful real-world failures in my previous life. I optimized data processing pathways using techniques that hadn't even been widely adopted yet in 2020. I saw the blind alleys I'd gone down before and sidestepped them with ease. But it wasn't just about power and efficiency. It was about protection. I built in layers of security, digital signatures woven into the very fabric of the mathematical models, obfuscated routines that would be incredibly difficult for anyone else to understand or replicate without the original architectural vision. If Vanessa or anyone else tried to claim this, they wouldn't just be stealing code. They'd be trying to decipher a map written in a language only I truly spoke. There were moments, late at night, staring at the glowing lines of code, where the ethical questions gnawed at me. Was this fair? To use knowledge from a future that for everyone else hadn't happened yet? Was I playing God with my own timeline, with the careers and fates of others? The image of myself on that ledge, the news alert of Vanessa's $50 million triumph burning on my phone screen, always brought me back. This wasn't about an unfair advantage. This was about leveling a playing field that had been brutally, fatally tilted against me. This was about reclaiming what was mine, and then some. The ethical burden, I decided, lay with those who stole, not with those who protected their creations. The work was all-consuming. Sleep became a luxury. My old apartment, once a symbol of my past, transformed into a secret laboratory, a crucible where my future was being forged. The hum of my laptop was the soundtrack to my resurrection. The time had to be right. I couldn't just drop a fully formed next-generation AI algorithm onto the table. That would be too suspicious, too out of sync with my supposed experience level as a new hire. My plan was to reveal it in stages, as a natural evolution of the work I was doing on Technova's existing projects. The opportunity came during a strategy meeting for Project Chimera. We were discussing the limitations of our current predictive models, the accuracy plateaus we were hitting. Vanessa was, as usual, leading the discussion, expertly guiding it towards solutions that subtly highlighted her stolen past achievements. We need a paradigm shift, she was saying, her voice resonating with authority. A new approach to how we're handling the sentiment analysis. I have some ideas brewing, drawing from my work on the Phoenix Initiative in New York. This was my opening. Actually, Vanessa, I interjected, my voice calm but clear, cutting through her monologue. All eyes turned to me. I've been experimenting with a hybrid approach on a small subset of the Chimera data, combining a transformer-based architecture with a novel attention mechanism I've been tinkering with in my spare time. A beat of silence. Jason Kim, the VP of Engineering, leaned forward, intrigued. A novel attention mechanism? Sarah, that sounds interesting. Can you elaborate? Vanessa's smile was fixed, but her eyes were like chips of ice. I was going off script, stealing her thunder. It's still very early stages, I said, feigning modesty. But the initial results are promising. I've managed to get a significant uplift in accuracy on the test dataset, particularly with nuanced or sarcastic language, which is where our current models struggle. I deliberately used phrases and concepts that were slightly ahead of the curve for 2020, but not so far out as to be unbelievable for a bright, dedicated engineer. Promising how? Jason pressed. I have a small prototype running on a dev server, I said. It's nothing fancy, just a proof of concept. But I could walk you through the core idea and the initial metrics if you're interested. Vanessa tried to regain control. Perhaps, Sarah, you could write up a proposal and we can review it in the next sprint planning meeting? We have a lot to get through today. No, Jason said, waving a hand dismissively. If Sarah has something that could give us an edge, I want to see it now. We're all here. Sarah, can you pull it up? Checkmate. I connected my laptop to the main screen. The interface was rough, deliberately unpolished, but the results spoke for themselves. I walked them through the architecture at a high level, focusing on the innovative components, the ones that were uniquely mine. I showed them the comparative metrics, my prototype outperforming the existing models by a margin that made jaws drop. I could feel Vanessa's gaze burning into me. She recognized the potential immediately. This wasn't just an improvement, it was a leap. And she knew, with a sickening certainty that must have been dawning on her, that this was beyond anything she could have conceived on her own. I made sure to name-drop Liam. Liam was instrumental in helping me set up the custom environment to even test this. The standard dev servers couldn't handle the processing load. And Maya. Maya gave me some great feedback on how to visualize the confidence scores, which helped me identify biases in the training data. I was sharing the light, weaving my allies into the narrative of my success. When I finished, there was a stunned silence, then a burst of excited chatter. Jason was beaming. Sarah, this is incredible, truly groundbreaking. Other team members crowded around asking technical questions, their initial skepticism replaced by genuine admiration. I answered them all, fluently, confidently, demonstrating a depth of understanding that left no doubt as to who the architect of this innovation was. I watched Vanessa out of the corner of my eye. Her expression was a carefully controlled mask, but I saw the subtle tightening around her mouth, the almost imperceptible flicker of something dark and furious in her eyes. Her usual tactics, dismiss, defer, dissect in private, then reassemble and claim as her own, they were failing. There were too many witnesses. The authorship was too clear, the game had changed, and Vanessa Blake knew it. Vanessa didn't confront me directly, that wasn't her style. Instead, a few days after my impromptu presentation, she invited me for coffee. Just a chat, Sarah, she'd said, her voice oozing with her signature blend of warmth and authority, to discuss next steps for your brilliant algorithm. The emphasis on your was a new, unsettling addition. We sat in a quiet corner of the bustling Technova cafe. Vanessa stirred her latte, her movements precise and deliberate. Sarah, she began, her eyes locking onto mine with unnerving intensity. I was incredibly impressed the other day, truly. That algorithm, it's a game changer, for Technova, for the industry. I murmured a polite thank you, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I've been thinking, she continued, leaning in conspiratorially. You have the technical genius, there's no doubt about that. But this kind of innovation, it needs the right champion to navigate the corporate landscape, to secure the resources, to give it the visibility it deserves. Here it comes, I thought. I have a proposition for you, Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. A partnership. We could collaborate on this. You focus on refining the technology, pushing the boundaries. I'll handle the strategy, the presentations to senior leadership, the investor pitches. Together, Sarah, we could make this thing monumental. We could own this space. Collaborate. I knew what that meant in Vanessa's lexicon. I'd do the work, she'd take the credit. It was her standard playbook, just packaged a little more seductively this time. She was appealing to my ambition, dangling the carrot of visibility, of support from the top. That's a generous offer, Vanessa, I said, feigning thoughtful consideration. My phone, tucked discreetly in my jacket pocket, was recording. I'd accidentally started a voice memo while fumbling for my wallet earlier. California law was a pain, but sometimes plausible deniability was your friend. Think about it, Sarah, she urged, her eyes gleaming. You're brilliant, but you're new here. You don't know the players, the politics. I do. I can protect you, guide you. We can rise together. Imagine your name, our names, associated with the biggest AI breakthrough this company has ever seen. Our names. The subtlety was gone. What would this collaboration look like exactly? I asked, playing along. In terms of ownership, recognition? Details, she said, waving a dismissive hand. We'd be a team. The credit would be shared, naturally. But the key is getting this in front of Marcus right, in front of the board, and I have the access, the credibility to do that in a way that ensures its success. She was essentially offering to be my agent, my manager, my handler, and eventually my replacement in the narrative of the algorithm's creation. I appreciate you thinking of me, Vanessa, I said, my voice carefully neutral. It's a lot to consider. Can I think about it? Of course, she said, her smile confident, predatory. She thought she had me. She thought my ambition, my supposed naivety, would make me an easy mark. Take your time, but don't take too long. Opportunities like this, they don't wait. As I walked away from the cafe, the recording safely stopped and saved. I felt a chill despite the California sunshine. Vanessa wasn't just trying to steal my work this time. She was trying to co-opt me, to make me a willing participant in my own erasure. She was more dangerous, more brazen than I'd even remembered. But I had the recording, another piece of evidence, another nail for her coffin. Vanessa's offer of partnership was just the opening salvo. When I didn't immediately jump at the chance to be her glorified ghost coder, the subtler, darker tactics began. First, I noticed the attempts to access my protected code repositories, failed login attempts from internal Technova IP addresses late at night. They were clumsy, easily traceable if I had admin access, but the intent was clear. Vanessa, or someone she'd tasked, was trying to get their hands on my source code. My personal firewalls and multi-factor authentication held firm. They wouldn't get it that easily. Then came the whispers. I'd walk past a group of colleagues and conversations would suddenly die down. I'd catch Vanessa in hushed conversations with other team members, her expression earnest and concerned, usually followed by them looking at me with a new, speculative coolness. She was trying to turn them against me, planting seeds of doubt about my competence, my attitude, my team spirit. Sarah's brilliant, of course, I overheard her saying to Mark, a senior engineer I'd once respected. But she can be a bit of a lone wolf, not always receptive to feedback. We need to make sure this project stays a team effort, you know? In meetings with leadership, the ones I was invited to, Vanessa would expertly reframe my contributions. If I presented a new feature, she'd jump in with, yes, an excellent development, building on the foundational concepts we've been discussing. My initial thought was to approach it from this angle, and Sarah has done a wonderful job executing that vision. She'd take my ideas, wrap them in her own narrative, and present them as a collaborative effort heavily guided by her strategic oversight. I remained calm, outwardly oblivious. I continued to deliver exceptional work, to meet deadlines, to be a helpful and responsive colleague. But every instance of her manipulation, every attempt at sabotage was noted, documented. I had a running log, time-stamped, with details of who said what, who was present. Privately, I reached out to the colleagues I knew were also feeling the chill of Vanessa's machinations. Liam came to me one afternoon looking troubled. Vanessa was asking me a lot of questions about your server resource usage for the new algorithm, Sarah. Seemed like she was looking for problems. Thanks for the heads up, Liam, I said calmly. I'm keeping all my resource requests transparent and justified. There's nothing for her to find. I then gently steered the conversation. Has she been supportive of your work on the new load balancers? Liam snorted. Supportive? She told Jason Kim they were over-engineered, and that I was gold-plating the solution. Then, when the old system nearly crashed during the stress test last week, she told him it was a good thing she'd pushed for a more robust infrastructure. She didn't even mention my name. "I'm sorry, Liam," I said genuinely. "That's not right." Maya, too, was feeling the pressure. Vanessa suggested I incorporate some of her design elements into the new UI, she told me, her voice tight with anger. Her elements were basically a watered-down version of what I'd shown her last week. And she told me my original concept was too radical for our user base. "Your concept was brilliant, Maya," I reassured her. "Make sure you keep all your original design files dated. And maybe start looking for advocates for your vision outside our immediate team." Vanessa was trying to isolate me to discredit me, but in doing so, she was inadvertently pushing her other victims closer to me. Her attempts to consolidate power were creating cracks in her own facade, and I was there patiently, quietly, collecting the pieces. Technova was in the midst of another funding round, and a major presentation to potential investors was scheduled. This was it, the big stage. The algorithm, my algorithm, was a centerpiece of Technova's pitch for its AI capabilities. I knew Vanessa would try to seize this moment. Jason Kim, the VP of Engineering, had insisted I be present, given my pivotal role in developing the technology. Vanessa had, of course, tried to argue against it. "Sarah is brilliant, Jason, but she's not polished. These are high-stakes investors. Perhaps it's better if I handle the technical deep dive. I can convey the essence of her work effectively." Jason, to his credit, had held firm. "Vanessa, Sarah built the damn thing. If there are technical questions, she's the best person to answer them. She'll be there." The conference room was opulent, filled with stern-faced men and women in expensive suits, their expressions unreadable. Marcus Wright, the founder, kicked off the presentation with his usual charismatic flair. Then it was Vanessa's turn to present the AI advancements. She was a master performer. She spoke eloquently about our team's breakthrough, about the collaborative innovation that had led to this revolutionary new capability. She used slides filled with impressive graphics and high-level summaries, never once mentioning my name as the primary architect. She was positioning herself as the visionary leader who had orchestrated this success. I sat calmly, watching her, my heart rate surprisingly steady. I had anticipated this. When Vanessa finished her overview, one of the lead investors, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Albright, leaned into her microphone. "Miss Blake, that's a very impressive presentation. The potential applications are clear. However, I'd like to understand the underlying technology a bit better. Could you walk us through the specifics of this novel attention mechanism you mentioned? How does it differ from existing transformer models, and what were the key challenges in its implementation?" This was it. The question I'd prepped Jason on. He'd subtly fed it to a friendly contact on Miss Albright's team, knowing it was the kind of probing, technical inquiry that would expose anyone who didn't have a true, deep understanding. Vanessa's smile didn't falter, but a flicker of something panic crossed her eyes. "Certainly," she began, her voice a little too bright. She launched into a jargon-filled explanation that was technically accurate on the surface, but lacked depth and stumbled over the nuances. She was reciting talking points, not explaining from a place of genuine comprehension. She couldn't explain the why behind the what. Miss Albright listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When Vanessa finished, there was a beat of awkward silence. Jason Kim seized the moment. "Perhaps, Miss Albright, Sarah Chen could elaborate? As the lead engineer who developed this specific mechanism, she has the most intimate knowledge of its intricacies." All eyes turned to me. Vanessa shot me a look that could curdle milk, but her composure was cracking. I leaned into my microphone. "Thank you, Jason. Miss Albright, that's an excellent question." I then proceeded to give a clear, concise, and deeply technical explanation of the attention mechanism. I didn't just describe what it did. I explained why it was designed that way. The theoretical underpinnings, the specific problems it solved, the dead ends I'd explored before arriving at the final architecture. I used analogies that made complex concepts accessible without dumbing them down. I spoke with passion and precision, the passion of a creator deeply connected to her work. When I finished, there was a different kind of silence. Not awkward, but appreciative. Miss Albright was nodding slowly, a thoughtful expression on her face. Thank you, Miss Chen. That was exceptionally clear and very impressive. She made a note on her pad, then looked directly at me. Your depth of understanding is remarkable. The other investors started peppering me with questions, bypassing Vanessa entirely. I answered each one with the same clarity and confidence. The tide had turned. The credit, which Vanessa had tried so hard to claim, was flowing inexorably back to its rightful owner. I wasn't just a coder. I was a visionary, an innovator, and now the people with the money knew it. Vanessa sat fuming silently, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling around her. She'd tried to present my work as her initiative. Instead, she'd only succeeded in highlighting her own superficial understanding. The investor meeting had repercussions. Word of my performance and Vanessa's fumbling quickly spread through the senior leadership ranks. And, most importantly, it reached Marcus Wright. A few days later, I received an email that made my heart skip a beat. It was from Marcus Wright's executive assistant. Mr. Wright requests the pleasure of your company for a meeting to discuss your work on the new AI algorithm. Please let me know your availability. This was unprecedented for an engineer at my level. Marcus Wright was a near mythical figure at Technova, rarely interacting directly with anyone below VP level. When I walked into his expansive corner office with its panoramic views of the city, Vanessa was already there. Of course she was. She wouldn't miss an opportunity to try and control the narrative, to insert herself back into the center of the story. Marcus Wright was older than I expected, with a kind face, keen, intelligent eyes, and an air of restless energy. He greeted me warmly, shaking my hand firmly. Sarah, thank you for coming. I've been hearing remarkable things about your algorithm. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Wright, I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. Vanessa immediately jumped in. Marcus, as I was explaining, Sarah has done some truly excellent development work under my team's strategic guidance. We're very proud of the progress we're making on Project Chimera. Marcus held up a hand, cutting her off gently but firmly. Vanessa, I appreciate your perspective, but today I'd like to hear directly from Sarah. Sarah, tell me about your vision for this technology. Where do you see it going? What are its limitations? What excites you most about it? It was the invitation I'd been waiting for. For the next hour, I spoke, not just about the algorithm's current capabilities, but about its future potential. I talked about applications beyond Technova's current roadmap, about the ethical considerations, about the research avenues it opened up. I spoke with the passion and depth of understanding that Vanessa could only feign. Vanessa tried to interject a few times to reframe my points, to subtly reclaim ownership. Yes, that aligns with the broader strategic roadmap we laid out. Or, that's an interesting angle, Sarah, one that we can explore in our next planning session. But Marcus seemed more interested in my direct, unvarnished insights. He asked probing questions, challenged my assumptions, engaged in a true intellectual sparring match. It was exhilarating. He was testing me, and I was meeting the challenge head-on. As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. He looked from me to Vanessa, then back to me. Sarah, he said, your technical acumen is undeniable. Your vision is compelling. He paused. I confess, I'm intrigued by the disconnect. Your performance reviews from Miss Blake's team haven't always reflected this level of brilliance or initiative. In fact, they've often painted a picture of someone who struggles to keep pace. Vanessa paled visibly. This was a direct challenge to her credibility from the CEO himself. I met Marcus's gaze steadily. Mr. Wright, I can only speak to the work I've done and the passion I have for it. I believe my contributions, when viewed objectively, speak for themselves. I didn't attack Vanessa. I didn't need to. I let the facts and Marcus's own dawning perception do the work. Indeed, Marcus said slowly, his eyes still holding mine. Indeed they do. The meeting ended. As I walked out, leaving Vanessa to face Marcus's unspoken questions, I knew I had planted a significant seed of doubt in the CEO's mind. He was starting to see the cracks in Vanessa's facade. He was starting to see me, the real me. The game was far from over, but the most powerful piece on the board was finally paying attention. Life, even a reborn one, wasn't all about corporate intrigue and revenge. Amidst the calculated moves and strategic planning, there were echoes of my past, and one of them was Alex Torres. Alex was a developer on another team, whip-smart, funny, with a smile that could melt glaciers. In my previous life, we'd dated briefly, a whirlwind romance that had burned bright and then fizzled out, mostly due to my all-consuming work schedule and the stress of Vanessa's escalating manipulations. It was a gentle regret, a what-if, that I hadn't dwelled on too much, given everything else. We reconnected at a company social, one of those forced fun events designed to boost morale. He sought me out, his eyes lighting up with that familiar spark when he saw me. "Sarah Chen, right? The AI whisperer?" he said, his grin infectious. News of my algorithm and my growing reputation had clearly spread. "Something like that," I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the cheap wine. The chemistry was still there, an easy, comfortable click that felt both nostalgic and new. We talked for hours about code, about sci-fi movies, about the best taco truck in the city. It was a relief to just be, to not be constantly strategizing, constantly on guard. But as we started spending more time together, coffee breaks that stretched into lunch, after-work drinks that led to dinner, the shadow of my foreknowledge fell over us. I knew how this had played out before. I knew the pressures that had driven us apart. Alex, perceptive as ever, noticed my guardedness. "You seem distant sometimes, Sarah," he said one evening as we were sharing a pizza. "Like you're a million miles away, or maybe a few years." He laughed, a throwaway comment, but it hit too close to home. He'd also pick up on odd moments of what he called my mysterious foreknowledge. Little things, me casually mentioning a server outage before it happened. I'd remembered it from the last timeline. Me knowing the plot twist of a movie we were watching, even though I claimed I'd never seen it. "You're like a psychic, Sarah," he'd joke. "Or you've got a DeLorean hidden somewhere." I wrestled with it. Should I tell him? Could I? How do you explain that you're living your life for the second time? That you know his favorite band before he mentions it because you've heard it all before? It sounded insane. He'd think I was crazy. And my mission was too important to jeopardize with a revelation that could shatter my credibility, or worse, unravel whatever delicate cosmic balance had given me this second chance. One night, after a particularly lovely evening, he leaned in to kiss me. The same kiss in the same place as 5 years prior. Deja vu, so potent it made me dizzy. In that moment, I could see the path ahead with him, the brief joy, the inevitable strain, the quiet drifting apart. I pulled back gently. "Alex, I can't do this." The hurt in his eyes was a physical pang in my chest. "Why not, Sarah? I thought we had something." "We do," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You're amazing, Alex. But I'm in a really complicated place right now. My focus has to be on my work, on some things I need to achieve. It wouldn't be fair to you." It was a half-truth, the best I could offer. He didn't understand, how could he? He left, confused and disappointed. I watched him go, a familiar ache in my heart. The personal cost of my rebirth, of my mission, was becoming clearer. Some things, it seemed, I would have to sacrifice. Romance, for now, was one of them. My focus had to remain razor sharp. Vanessa, Technova, justice. There was no room for anything else. If romance was a casualty, friendship was a lifeline. Especially my friendship with Dev Patel. Knowing his original fate, every moment with him felt precious, a gift. I was determined to not just save his life, but to build a bond even stronger than the one we'd had before. He'd gotten over my strange, tearful hug on my first day, mostly because I'd quickly proven myself to be a competent and supportive colleague. We fell into an easy camaraderie, fueled by shared geeky interests and a similar sense of humor. We'd grab lunch, work late on projects together, bounce ideas off each other. He was brilliant, his mind quick and insightful, and he was one of the few people at Technova whose integrity I trusted implicitly. The shadow of his impending accident, however, loomed large in my mind. It was still nearly 2 years away in this new timeline, but the date was seared into my memory. How could I warn him? How could I prevent it without sounding like a lunatic? I started subtly. Dev, you're always rushing. You drive that little sports car of yours like a maniac sometimes. He'd laugh. Hey, gotta live life in the fast lane, Sarah. Yeah, but maybe not all the lanes, all the time, I'd say, trying to keep it light, but with an undercurrent of seriousness. Seriously, man, be careful. Especially on rainy nights, the roads get slick. The accident, I remembered, had happened on a stormy evening. He'd wave it off, but sometimes I'd catch him looking at me thoughtfully. My occasional, oddly specific warnings, my sometimes too intense concern for his well-being. It was probably a bit strange. Our growing closeness didn't go unnoticed by Vanessa. She saw Dev as another potential ally for me, another piece on the board she couldn't control. She started making subtle digs about our coziness, implying unprofessionalism. She'd assign us to different, conflicting projects, trying to drive a wedge between us. It backfired. Her attempts to isolate me only made Dev more protective, more loyal. He saw her manipulations for what they were, especially after I'd subtly shared some of my documented observations about her management style, framed as concerns from a new employee trying to understand the team dynamics. She's something else, isn't she? Dev said one evening after Vanessa had publicly berated him for a minor delay that was entirely her fault. The way she twists things. It's like reality is just whatever she says it is. I know, I said quietly. That's why we have to watch each other's backs. He became my confidant, in a limited way. I couldn't tell him the truth, the whole truth, but I hinted. I spoke of a strong intuition about certain people, about a feeling of déjà vu regarding company politics. I told him I felt an overwhelming need to protect the people I cared about at Technova. You're a good person, Sarah, he said, his dark eyes sincere. A little intense sometimes, maybe a little psychic, he added with a grin, echoing Alex's joke. But your heart's in the right place, and you're a damn good engineer. Whatever battles you're fighting, I've got your back. His words were a balm to my often weary soul. Knowing I had at least one true friend, one person I could count on, made the fight ahead seem a little less daunting, and I silently renewed my vow. I would save him, whatever it took. His life, his friendship, was a non-negotiable part of the future I was building. Vanessa was like a cornered animal. Her subtle methods, the gaslighting, the credit stealing, the attempts to co-opt me weren't working. I was too prepared, too documented. My algorithm was gaining traction, Marcus Wright was clearly impressed with me, and I was building alliances. She was losing control, so she escalated. The subtlety vanished, replaced by a more direct, vicious campaign to discredit me. She started suggesting I was unstable. Sarah's been under a lot of pressure, she'd say with feigned concern in team meetings I wasn't present for, according to my sources, Liam and Maya. I'm a bit worried about her. She's been acting erratically. Rumors began to circulate that I was difficult to work with, that I was overly sensitive to criticism, that I was hoarding information, not being a team player. These were classic Vanessa tactics, designed to isolate me and paint me as the problem. Then came the more damaging insinuation that I was stealing code. She couldn't attack my current algorithm directly. My authorship was too well established by now. So, she went for my past. She started planting rumors that I'd had issues at my previous, fictional in this timeline, employer. That there were questions about the originality of my work there. She had no proof, of course, because it wasn't true, but mudsticks. She was trying to create a pattern to suggest that my brilliance was borrowed, not earned. She manipulated team dynamics, assigning key tasks for Project Chimera to other developers, bypassing me, trying to sideline me from my own creation. She'd praise them publicly for stepping up and taking ownership, implying I was failing to do so. I recognized these tactics. They were the same ones she'd used to destroy me in my previous life. The difference was, this time, I wasn't caught off guard. I was expecting it, and I was ready. My network of allies, small but crucial, kept me informed. Dev would forward me passive-aggressive email chains. Maya would report on Vanessa's attempts to badmouth me to other department heads. Liam would give me a heads up if IT got any unusual requests related to my network access or file permissions. I continued to document everything: the rumors, the sources, where known, the impact on my work and reputation. I kept my head down, focused on delivering results, being impeccably professional. I didn't engage with the gossip. I didn't defend myself against shadows. I let my work and my carefully constructed evidence be my shield and my sword. But the pressure was immense. It was a war of attrition, and Vanessa was determined to wear me down, to force a mistake, to create an incident she could use against me. It happened late one evening. I was packing up, one of the last ones in the office, when Vanessa appeared at my desk. Her usual polished composure was slightly frayed. There were shadows under her eyes. She wasn't sleeping well. Good. "Sarah, we need to talk." Her voice was low, devoid of its usual charm. "Vanessa," I said, my tone neutral. "What can I do for you?" She didn't bother with pleasantries. "This has to stop." "What has to stop?" I asked, feigning innocence, though my heart was hammering. This was it, the direct confrontation. "You know damn well what," she hissed, her voice venomous. "Your little games, your maneuvering, your attempts to undermine me." I raised an eyebrow. "Undermine you?" "Vanessa, I've been doing my job, developing the algorithm, contributing to the team. If my work is being recognized, it's because of its merit." "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped, taking a step closer, invading my personal space. "You think I don't see what you're doing? Cozying up to Jason, to Marcus, trying to make yourself look like some kind of wunderkind." "I don't try to look like anything, Vanessa," I said, my voice firm but quiet. "I am a good engineer, and my work speaks for itself. Perhaps the issue isn't what I'm doing, but how it makes you feel." Her eyes blazed. "You're trying to steal my project." A humorless laugh escaped me. "Your project? Vanessa, I conceived it. I built it. I presented it. My name is on every commit, every design document. How exactly am I stealing what is already mine?" "It was a team effort, under my leadership," she insisted, her voice rising. "Was it?" I countered, my voice dropping, becoming dangerously soft. "Or was it my late nights, my insights, my code, that you were planning to put your name on, just like you've done with so many others? Just like you did with the predecessor to this algorithm? The one you got $50 million in funding for?" I let that last part slip. A deliberate, calculated risk. A hint that I knew more than I should. Her face went pale. The $50 million, that was from my other life. How could I possibly? "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes for the first time. "Oh, I think you do," I said, leaning back in my chair, meeting her gaze. "And Vanessa, just so we're clear, I've been documenting everything. Every meeting, every email, every attempt to sabotage my work, to spread false rumors. Every conversation where you've tried to claim my ideas as your own." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I even have a rather interesting recording from our little partnership chat in the cafe." The color drained completely from her face. She looked for a moment utterly defeated. You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I?" I said, my voice like ice. "You see, Vanessa, I know how you operate. I know your playbook. I can predict your every move. You tried to discredit me? I have witness statements and email trails. You tried to imply I stole code? I have irrefutable proof of my authorship, time-stamped and verified for every single line. You tried to isolate me? You only succeeded in making people realize who their real enemy was." She stared at me, speechless, her mind clearly racing, trying to understand how I could be so many steps ahead of her. "This isn't just about an algorithm anymore, is it, Sarah?" she finally whispered, her voice hoarse. "What do you want?" "I want justice, Vanessa," I said softly, "and I want what's mine, all of it." She backed away slowly, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning, horrified comprehension. She didn't understand how I knew so much, how I was so prepared. But she understood finally that I was not the naive victim she'd destroyed before. I was something else entirely, something far more dangerous to her. The first hint. She finally knew I was not what I seemed. And the fear, I realized with a grim satisfaction, suited her. The confrontation with Vanessa was a turning point. She knew I had ammunition, but she didn't know the extent of it, nor the impossible source of my foresight. Her attacks became less frequent, more cautious, but I knew she was far from defeated. She was regrouping, looking for another angle. I needed to escalate my defense from mere documentation to undeniable legal armor. It was time to file the patent. In my previous life, by the time my algorithm was revealed by Vanessa, Technova had initiated the patent process with Vanessa listed as the primary inventor. I had been a footnote, a contributor. This time, I would be the undisputed originator, legally and publicly. Dev, bless his loyal heart, had a cousin who was an intellectual property attorney. "She's a shark, Sarah," he'd told me over a clandestine lunch, "and she hates corporate bullies. You should talk to her." I met with Alicia Patel in her sleek downtown office. She was sharp, incisive, and listened to my carefully curated version of events. A brilliant engineer whose groundbreaking work was at risk of being usurped by a manipulative superior, with a steely glint in her eye. I didn't tell her about the rebirth, of course. I just laid out the technical details of the algorithm, the timeline of its development, backed by my meticulous records, and my concerns about Vanessa. "The key, Miss Chen," Alicia said after reviewing my preliminary documentation, "is to establish, unequivocally, your conception and reduction to practice of the novel aspects of this invention. Your timestamps, your private repositories, your detailed notes. This is excellent. We need to move fast." We worked tirelessly over the next few weeks, Alicia and her team translating my complex code and architectural designs into the precise, arcane language of patent law. We focused on the core, truly novel elements of the algorithm: the unique attention mechanism, the advanced learning heuristics, the security features I'd woven in. These were things that were demonstrably mine, conceived and developed independently outside the direct scope of my Technova assignments, even if I was using company resources for some of the testing, which was a gray area we were prepared to navigate. The day I signed the patent application, listing myself as the sole inventor, felt like a monumental victory. It was a stake in the ground, a declaration of ownership that transcended company politics. The application was filed secretly without Technova's official involvement at this stage. This was my personal IP, developed in its most advanced form on my own time. A few weeks later, a notification landed in Alicia's inbox, which she immediately forwarded to me. Technova, under Vanessa Blake's direction as team lead, had also filed a patent application for an AI algorithm with advanced predictive capabilities. The race was on. My application, with its earlier conception dates and more detailed, verifiably authored technical disclosures, had priority. But Vanessa was clearly trying to create a competing claim, to muddy the waters, to leverage Technova's corporate weight. It was no longer just a battle for credit within the company. It was a legal war for the ownership of a multi-million-dollar piece of intellectual property. The legitimate inventor versus the corporate thief. The conflicting patent applications did not go unnoticed by Marcus Wright. Two separate filings for essentially the same core technology, originating from the same team, one from a relatively new engineer, filed personally, and one from the company, spearheaded by her team lead. It was a huge red flag, a potential legal minefield, and a massive internal headache. Marcus, whatever his flaws, was not a fool. He prided himself on Technova being an innovator, and the integrity of their IP was paramount. He initiated an internal investigation, discreet but thorough. He personally interviewed team members, Liam, Maya, other engineers on Project Chimera. He wanted to know who created what, who contributed which ideas, what the development timeline looked like from their perspective. My quiet groundwork with my allies began to pay off. They didn't need to attack Vanessa, they just needed to tell the truth about their own experiences, about my contributions. "Sarah designed the core architecture for the new sentiment analysis module, Mr. Wright," Liam stated, his voice surprisingly firm. "I helped her set up the dedicated servers because her models were too complex for the standard dev environment. She was working on those specific novel components for months." Maya, when questioned about the UI for visualizing the algorithm's outputs, presented her dated sketches. These were my initial concepts, Mr. Wright. Sarah provided the technical insights for the data streams. Miss Blake later suggested some modifications, but the foundational design was a collaboration between Sarah and myself. Marcus reviewed the documentation from both patent applications. He looked at the commit histories in Technova's internal repositories, where I'd been officially developing the less advanced version. He saw my name, my timestamps, my detailed comments on the initial frameworks. Then he would have seen Vanessa's later commits, often refactoring my code, adding superficial layers, but rarely contributing anything truly foundational to the core novelty. Vanessa, I knew, was counting on her seniority, her carefully cultivated relationship with Marcus, her ability to spin a convincing narrative. She'd argue that my work was done under her direction, that my ideas were merely an execution of her broader strategic vision. She'd claim that as team lead, the IP developed by her team naturally fell under her purview. But the devil was in the details, and my details were meticulous, irrefutable. Her details were vague, reliant on assertion rather than proof. The investigation dragged on for weeks. The tension in the office was thick enough to cut with a knife. Vanessa was alternately charming and bullying, trying to rally support to discredit me further. I remained calm, focused, cooperating fully with Marcus's inquiries, providing any documentation he requested. I knew the truth was on my side, but I also knew that corporate politics could be a fickle beast. Vanessa had allies, people she'd promoted, people who owed her favors. Marcus was under pressure to resolve this quickly and quietly, to avoid a public scandal that could derail the funding round. The fate of my algorithm, my career, and potentially the future of Technova hung in the balance, dependent on one man's ability to see through a web of deceit and recognize the unvarnished truth. The email landed in my inbox like a death knell. Meeting invitation, performance review, and Project Chimera next steps. From HR, with Vanessa Blake and Jason Kim as required attendees. My blood ran cold. This was it. This was the meeting. The same kind of meeting where, in my previous life, I'd been unceremoniously fired, my career and spirit shattered. Despite all my precautions, all my meticulous planning, was history about to repeat itself? The past few weeks had been a roller coaster. Marcus Wright's investigation had been ongoing, but there were whispers, rumors leaking from the upper echelons of management. Rumors that Vanessa, with her connections and her relentless lobbying, was swaying key decision-makers. Rumors that the company was leaning towards backing her patent claim to avoid a messy internal conflict, offering me a settlement, a token acknowledgement perhaps, but ultimately siding with the established hierarchy. I walked into the sterile HR conference room, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. Vanessa was already there, a smug, almost triumphant smirk playing on her lips. Jason Kim looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze. That was a bad sign. The HR representative, a different one this time, a stern-faced woman named Miss Albright, no relation to the investor, just an unfortunate coincidence of names, began the meeting with a series of bland corporate platitudes. Then, she got to the point. Sarah, we've completed our review of the situation regarding Project Chimera and the associated intellectual property claims. She paused, her eyes flicking towards Vanessa, then back to me. While your technical contributions are acknowledged, the company has determined that, given Miss Blake's role as team lead and her strategic oversight of the project from its inception, the primary inventorship and ownership of the algorithm resides with Technova under her direction. A wave of dizziness washed over me. No, this couldn't be happening. Not again. Furthermore, Miss Albright continued, her voice devoid of emotion, there have been concerns raised about your collaborative approach and alignment with team objectives. Vanessa has indicated that your recent behavior has been disruptive. Vanessa chimed in, her voice dripping with false sincerity. Sarah, I'm so sorry it's come to this. I truly am. I had such high hopes for you. But your unwillingness to integrate fully with the team, your resistance to guidance, it's become untenable. This was a nightmare, a carbon copy of my previous termination. The same lies, the same betrayals. My careful documentation, my allies, Marcus Wright's supposed discernment. Had it all been for nothing? I felt a moment of crushing despair so profound it almost buckled my knees. The faces in the room blurred. The walls seemed to close in. I had fought so hard, planned so meticulously, only to end up in the exact same place, defeated, discarded. Therefore, Miss Albright said, her voice a distant drone, we've decided that it's in the best interest of both you and Technova to part ways. Termination, again. The word hung in the air, suffocating me. Just as Miss Albright was sliding a severance agreement across the table, the door to the conference room burst open. Dev Patel stood there, his face flushed, a laptop clutched in his hand. He looked furious. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice tight with anger, "but there's something you all need to see." Vanessa shot him a venomous look. "Dev, this is a private meeting. You need to leave." "No," Dev said, his gaze fixed on Marcus Wright, who had unexpectedly followed him into the room, his expression grim. "Marcus, you need to see this. Jason, Miss Albright. Everyone." He strode to the head of the table, connected his laptop to the projector. The screen flickered to life, displaying a complex forensic analysis of Technova's code repositories, server logs, and email servers. "I've been doing some digging," Dev announced, his voice ringing with conviction, "at Marcus's request, and what I found is illuminating." He started clicking through slides, each one a hammer blow to Vanessa's credibility. Timestamps from my private GitHub, predating any work on Project Chimera, showing the core architecture of my algorithm already well developed. Watermarks embedded deep within the code Vanessa had submitted for the company patent. Watermarks that matched my unique signature. Server logs showing Vanessa's repeated, unauthorized attempts to access my protected development environments. Then came the witness statements. Video snippets of Liam and Maya recorded by Dev, detailing Vanessa's systematic attempts to steal their ideas, to take credit for their work, to badmouth and undermine them. A clear pattern of behavior, and then the pièce de résistance. The audio recording from my partnership chat with Vanessa in the cafe. Her voice, smooth and manipulative, offering to collaborate, to take my algorithm to the top, with the unspoken understanding that she would be the one fronting it, claiming the lion's share of the credit. Her dismissive remarks about details when I asked about ownership. The room was silent, save for Vanessa's ragged breathing. The color had drained from her face. She looked like a trapped animal. Marcus Wright's face was like thunder. He stared at Vanessa, his eyes blazing with a cold fury I'd never seen in him. "Vanessa," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "do you have anything to say?" Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. Words failed her. The evidence was too overwhelming, too damning. "I see," Marcus said, his voice like chipping ice. He turned to Miss Albright. "It appears we've been misinformed. Grossly misinformed." He looked at me, a flicker of something, respect, apology, in his eyes. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. It seems I allowed myself to be manipulated." The reversal was stunning, dramatic. The severance agreement lay forgotten on the table. The air crackled with tension. Jason Kim was staring at Vanessa with open disgust. Miss Albright looked flustered, shuffling her papers. Marcus Wright's next words were delivered with chilling finality. "Vanessa Blake, your employment with Technova is terminated. Effective immediately, security will escort you from the premises." Vanessa finally found her voice, a strangled sob. "Marcus, you can't—" I can," Marcus said, his voice unyielding. "And I have. You have abused your position. You have lied. You have attempted to defraud this company and your colleagues. You are a disgrace." The fight was over, not with my termination, but with hers. The taste of victory was sudden, sharp, and surprisingly complex. Vindication. It should have felt triumphant. Vanessa was gone, her career in tatters, her reputation shredded. My algorithm was mine, unequivocally. Marcus Wright had publicly acknowledged my contributions, had apologized for the company's and his own misjudgment. But as I walked out of that HR office, leaving a shattered Vanessa to be escorted out by security, I didn't feel the elation I'd expected. Instead, there was a strange emptiness, a hollowness in the pit of my stomach. I had won. I had avoided my previous fate. I had exacted a form of justice. but at what cost? And was it enough? The company culture, the one that had allowed a predator like Vanessa to thrive for so long, that hadn't changed. The system that valued perception over substance, that enabled manipulation and theft, that was still in place. Firing Vanessa was like cutting off the head of a hydra. Another one, perhaps more subtle, could easily grow in its place. Marcus Wright, in a bid to make amends and retain his now most valuable asset, offered me Vanessa's newly vacant position, team lead, AI development. It was a significant promotion, a recognition of my talent and leadership potential. More money, more responsibility, more power. Everything I thought I wanted. I asked for a few days to consider. Everyone was shocked. Why would I hesitate? This was the ultimate prize, wasn't it? But as I walked through the Technova offices, watching the hushed conversations, the curious glances, I realized something profound. Simply stepping into Vanessa's shoes wasn't the answer. It wasn't enough to just survive and climb the ladder in a flawed system. I didn't want to just be the new queen in the same old tainted castle. My rebirth, my second chance, had to mean more than just personal revenge or career advancement within these walls. It had to be about building something better, something different, something pure. After 3 days of intense soul-searching, I walked back into Marcus Wright's office. "Mr. Wright," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I appreciate your offer more than you know, and I appreciate your apology and the actions you've taken." He smiled, expecting my acceptance. "So, you'll take the team lead position, Sarah? We can make the announcement this afternoon." "No, Mr. Wright," I said quietly. "I won't." His smile faltered. I don't understand." "I'm resigning from Technova." The shock in Marcus Wright's eyes was profound. He tried to reason with me, to offer me more money, more resources, a direct line to him. He didn't understand why I would walk away from such a hard-won victory. "Sarah, you have the world at your feet here," he'd said, bewildered. "Why leave now?" "Because, Mr. Wright," I replied, "my vision for what I want to create, the kind of environment I want to build, it's bigger than what Technova can offer me, even in a leadership role. It's not about the title or the money. It's about building something that truly reflects my values." I resigned on my own terms, head held high. The news sent shockwaves through the company. Sarah Chen, the brilliant engineer who had taken down the formidable Vanessa Blake, the one who had the CEO's ear, was walking away. But I wasn't just walking away, I was walking towards something. My patent for the algorithm was solid, my sole inventorship legally established. That was my foundation. My knowledge, my experience from 2 lifetimes, that was my blueprint. I reached out to Dev. He'd been stunned by my resignation, but when I explained my vision, his eyes lit up. A company built on transparency, on true collaboration, where innovation is nurtured, not stolen. Sarah, that sounds like a dream." "It doesn't have to be a dream, Dev," I said. "Will you help me build it? Be my CTO?" His grin was wide and immediate. "Are you kidding? I'm in." I then approached Liam and Maya. They'd both been shaken by the recent events. Their faith in Technova eroded despite Vanessa's ousting. They, too, were looking for something more, something better. When I laid out my plan for a new startup, one that would value their skills, protect their contributions, and foster a culture of mutual respect, they didn't hesitate. My little network of allies, forged in the crucible of Vanessa's tyranny, became the founding team of my new venture. We found a small office space, pooled our meager resources, and began the daunting, exhilarating process of building a company from scratch. I named it Rebirth Technologies. It was more than just a clever name, it was a promise to myself, to my team, and to the industry. A promise to do things differently this time, to create a place where brilliance could flourish, unencumbered by politics and predation. As I packed up my few belongings from my Technova desk, I found a discarded company strategy document outlining their 5-year roadmap. It was full of projections, market analyses, and planned product launches. Knowledge from my previous life told me which of those plans would succeed, which would fail, where their hidden vulnerabilities lay. I smiled, a small, secret smile. I folded the document neatly and tucked it away. Information was power. and I had a feeling that one day, that information might be very useful indeed. The game wasn't over, it was just beginning on a whole new playing field. My playing field. 3 years. 3 years of relentless work, of bootstrapping, of near failures, and unexpected triumphs. 3 years since I walked away from Technova, a newly minted patent in my hand, and a revolutionary idea in my head. Rebirth Technologies was no longer just a dream sketched out on napkins in a cheap diner. It was a thriving reality. Our modest office had grown into a sleek, modern workspace, buzzing with the energy of 50 brilliant, passionate employees. My algorithm, the one I'd poured 2 lifetimes of knowledge into, had become the industry-leading technology in AI-driven predictive analytics. We'd refined it, expanded its applications, and built a suite of products around it that were disrupting markets from finance to healthcare. We were the nimble, innovative David to the Goliaths of the tech world. And our company culture? That was my proudest achievement. At Rebirth, attribution and collaboration weren't just buzzwords. They were woven into the fabric of how we operated. We had transparent processes for idea generation and development. We celebrated individual contributions and team successes with equal fervor. There were no Vanessas here. I'd made sure of it. Our hiring process was rigorous, focusing not just on skill but on character. Dev was by my side, my CTO, my partner in crime, my dearest friend. He was thriving, his brilliance unconstrained, his laughter echoing through the halls. The date of his potential accident had come and gone. I'd made sure he wasn't on the road that stormy night, inventing a critical and entirely fictional server emergency that required his presence in the office. He'd grumbled, but he'd stayed. He was alive. He was happy. That, in itself, felt like a universe-altering victory. I had found a balance, a precarious but precious equilibrium between ambition and ethics. I was a CEO, a leader, but I hoped a different kind of leader. One who remembered what it felt like to be powerless, to be voiceless. Rebirth Technologies was more than just a successful startup. It was a testament to a second chance, well lived. It was proof that you could build something extraordinary without sacrificing your soul. Meanwhile, the behemoth that was Technova was stumbling. Without my algorithm, the true advanced version of it, their AI division had stagnated. They'd tried to reverse engineer what I'd left behind to build upon the foundations I'd laid during my brief tenure. But they lacked the core vision, the deep understanding. They were always a step behind, chasing shadows. Their attempts to develop competing technology were clunky, derivative, and expensive. Project Chimera, once hailed as their flagship AI initiative, had become a bloated, underperforming money pit. Vanessa's departure had left a leadership vacuum, and the internal politics and infighting that she had fostered continued to fester, hampering any real progress. Marcus Wright, I heard through the industry grapevine, was under immense pressure from the board and investors. Technova's stock price had dipped. Their reputation as an innovator was tarnished. They were losing market share to nimbler, more focused companies. Companies like Rebirth Technologies. The irony wasn't lost on me. The company that had discarded me, that had tried to steal my creation, was now faltering precisely because they no longer had access to it. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. The sender, Marcus Wright. Subject, potential synergies. My heart gave a familiar lurch, a mixture of old anxieties and new, steely resolve. He wanted to talk. He wanted to discuss a potential acquisition. The tables, it seemed, were about to turn in a way I could never have imagined, even in my wildest, most vengeful dreams. The boardroom at Rebirth Technologies was modest compared to Technova's opulent spaces, but it was ours. And today, it was the site of a monumental power shift. Across the polished table sat Marcus Wright. He looked older, more careworn than I remembered. The restless energy was still there, but it was tinged with a new weariness. The confident, almost arrogant visionary who had once held my fate in his hands was now, quite clearly, a desperate man. Beside me sat Dev, calm and collected, our legal counsel, Alicia Patel, Dev's cousin, now a partner at her firm and our go-to for all things IP, and our CFO. We were a united front. "Sarah," Marcus began, his voice lacking its former boom, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Rebirth Technologies. What you've built here is truly remarkable. Admirable. Thank you, Marcus, I replied, my tone polite but firm. No emotional tells. This was business. We're proud of what we've achieved. Indeed. He cleared his throat. As you know, Technova has been facing some challenges in the AI space. We've been incredibly impressed by your algorithm, its performance, its market penetration. It's, frankly, years ahead of anything we've been able to develop internally. An admission that must have tasted like ash in his mouth. We believe, he continued, getting to the point, that a combination of our companies could be mutually beneficial. Technova has the scale, the resources, the market access. Rebirth has the cutting-edge technology. Together, we could dominate the AI landscape. He was proposing an acquisition. Technova wanted to buy Rebirth Technologies. My company, my creation. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. We're open to discussing possibilities, Marcus, I said, my voice even. What are you proposing? He laid out their initial offer. It was substantial, a testament to how badly they needed us. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about control. It was about legacy. The negotiations were intense, stretching over several days. They wanted our technology, our team, our IP. We, in turn, had our demands. We wouldn't be absorbed and dismantled. Rebirth's culture, our way of doing things, had to be preserved. I, Sarah Chen, would remain CEO of the combined AI division. Dev would be my undisputed CTO. Our key people would be protected, their roles guaranteed, and this was where my secret weapon, my knowledge of Technova's future vulnerabilities, came into play. During a particularly tense moment when Marcus was balking at some of our demands regarding autonomy for the Rebirth team post-acquisition, I leaned forward. Marcus, I said, my voice dropping slightly, I understand your concerns about integration, but let's be frank. Technova has some significant underlying issues that go beyond just the AI division. Your reliance on the outdated Helios's platform for your enterprise clients? That's a ticking time bomb. Your Asian market expansion plan for Q3 next year? It's going to hit a major regulatory wall in China that your team hasn't anticipated, and the Prometheus initiative in your R&D pipeline? It's a dead end, technically flawed from the outset. Marcus stared at me, his face paling. How could I possibly know these things? These were deeply internal, highly confidential strategic details, some of them not even widely known within Technova's own senior leadership. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. How do you know that? He whispered, his voice hoarse. I just smiled, a slow, enigmatic smile. Let's just say, Marcus, I have a very good understanding of the landscape. And I know how to make this acquisition a true success. Not just a desperate stopgap for Technova, but it has to be on our terms. He was rattled, deeply. He realized, in that moment, that I wasn't just a brilliant engineer who had built a successful startup. I was something more. Someone who knew far too much about his company's inner workings, its past failures, and its future pitfalls. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. He needed me, my technology, and apparently my uncanny foresight far more than I needed him. The remaining negotiations were swift. My terms were met. After the main deal points were agreed upon, but before the final papers were signed, I asked for a private conversation with Marcus. Just the two of us, in his now much diminished office at Technova during a site visit. He looked wary, unsettled. The man who had once dismissed me based on the lies of another was now facing someone who held an inexplicable power over him. Marcus, I began, looking around the familiar yet now alien space. Do you remember that day, 5 years ago, when you fired me from this very company? He flinched, the memory clearly painful. Sarah, I've apologized for that. It was a grave mistake. I was misled. You were, I agreed, by Vanessa Blake. She told you I was an underperformer, that I was difficult, that the algorithm she was taking credit for was her strategic vision. He nodded slowly, his eyes searching mine. Yes, that's what I was told. And you believed her, I stated. Not unkindly, but as a matter of fact. You didn't look deeper, you didn't question. You just signed off on my termination. I was wrong, he said, his voice low. And I've regretted it ever since, especially watching what you've achieved with Rebirth. I leaned forward slightly. Marcus, what if I told you that this isn't the first time we've had this conversation? What if I told you that I remember that day, that termination, with a clarity that feels like it happened yesterday because, in a way, for me, it almost did? He looked thoroughly unnerved now. Sarah, I don't understand what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Marcus, I said softly. I'm just sharing a perspective. Imagine you were given a second chance, a chance to right a terrible wrong, to reclaim what was stolen from you. Imagine you knew exactly how things would unfold, who would betray you, who would stand by you. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The impossible knowledge I displayed during negotiations, my calm confidence in the face of his company's downfall, was he starting to piece together something that defied rational explanation? You, you couldn't possibly, he stammered. Couldn't I? I smiled faintly. Marcus, I'm offering you a chance to be part of something truly transformative. The combined company under our new leadership can redefine this industry. I'm willing to offer you an advisory role, a significant one, where your experience and vision can still contribute. But it comes with a condition. What condition? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. You need to publicly acknowledge not just the mistake of my firing, but the systemic issues at Technova that allowed someone like Vanessa Blake to thrive, to manipulate, to nearly destroy the careers of talented people. You need to commit, truly commit to the cultural changes we will be implementing. No more lip service, real, measurable change. It was a tense moment. His pride, his legacy, all hanging in the balance. He was a man who had built an empire, now being dictated terms by someone he had once discarded. And yet, there was something else in his eyes, too. A dawning respect, perhaps even a touch of awe. He looked at me for a long, silent minute. Then, he let out a slow breath and nodded. All right, Sarah, all right. I don't understand how, but I understand what. You have my word. The recognition was there. He didn't comprehend the mechanics of my rebirth, but he accepted its reality, its impact. He was humbled. And perhaps, just perhaps, he was ready for his own kind of redemption. The day the acquisition was finalized, I walked through the halls of Technova not as an employee, not as a visitor, but as its new owner, or at least the CEO of its most vital, now all-encompassing AI division. Rebirth Technologies had effectively swallowed Technova's future. It was a surreal experience. The familiar corridors, the open-plan offices, the break rooms where I'd once shared hushed conversations with Dev, Liam, and Maya. They were all the same, yet utterly different. I was different. I paused at the spot where my old desk had been, the one I'd occupied in my first life, the one where Vanessa had first approached me, her smile like a Venus flytrap. An emotional wave, a complex mix of triumph, sorrow, and a strange sense of peace washed over me. This was where my previous life had effectively ended, where my despair had begun. And now, I was back. Not as a victim, but as a victor. Later that day, I addressed all the employees of the newly merged entity, Technova Reborn, as some were already calling it, though the official name was still being debated. I stood in the large auditorium, the same one where Vanessa had tried to steal the limelight during that fateful investor presentation. Today marks a new beginning, I said, my voice clear and steady, resonating through the packed room. For all of us, we are bringing together the scale and resources of Technova with the innovation and agility of Rebirth Technologies. But more than that, we are building a new culture. I didn't dwell on the past, on Vanessa, on the mistakes that had been made. Everyone knew that story. Instead, I focused on the future. Our foundation will be built on 3 pillars, I declared: innovation, integrity, and attribution. We will foster an environment where groundbreaking ideas are born and nurtured. We will operate with transparency and ethical conduct at every level. And we will ensure that every single contribution, big or small, is recognized and valued. No one's work will be stolen here. No one's voice will be silenced. I outlined the new policies we'd be implementing, clear guidelines for intellectual property, robust systems for tracking and crediting individual contributions, anonymous channels for reporting unethical behavior, and a zero-tolerance policy for workplace bullying and manipulation. Changes designed to prevent what had happened to me and to others from ever happening again. I saw hope in the faces of many. I saw skepticism in others. Change was hard, but I was determined. This wasn't just about running a successful company. It was about creating a legacy. A few weeks into the integration process, I was touring one of Technova's smaller, somewhat neglected satellite offices, a relic from a previous acquisition, located in a less glamorous part of Silicon Valley. It was mostly administrative staff, a few legacy support teams. As I walked down a drab corridor, a familiar figure emerged from a small, windowless office and carrying a stack of files. Her hair was different, shorter, less meticulously styled. Her clothes were ordinary. Sensible shoes, a slightly worn cardigan. She looked tired, stressed. It was Vanessa Blake. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected this. After her termination from Technova, I'd heard she'd been effectively blacklisted from tech leadership roles. Her reputation was toxic. Apparently, this was the only job she could get, a low-level administrative position, buried deep in the forgotten bowels of the company I now essentially owned. She looked up, her eyes momentarily meeting mine before flicking away, clearly not recognizing me at first. Why would she? I was the new CEO, surrounded by an entourage of executives. She was a face in the crowd. Then, as I drew closer, something in my expression, some flicker of recognition on my part, must have registered. Her eyes widened. The files slipped from her grasp, scattering across the cheap linoleum floor. The moment of recognition, it was stark, undeniable. Fear, pure and undiluted, flooded her face. Then came disbelief, confusion, and a dawning, horrified comprehension. The woman she had destroyed, the woman whose career she had stolen, the woman she thought she had vanquished, was standing before her, not as a ghost from her past, but as her new boss, the ultimate boss. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Her carefully constructed world, whatever was left of it, had just imploded. I looked at her, a whirlwind of emotions churning within me. Pity? No, not pity. A strange, detached sense of finality. The circle was now truly, undeniably complete. The question was, what did I do now? The power to destroy her utterly, to erase her even from this minor, insignificant role, was mine. The image of Vanessa, pale and trembling, surrounded by scattered files in that dreary hallway, haunted me for days. The power I now held over her was absolute. I could fire her with a snap of my fingers. No one would question it. In fact, many would probably applaud it. An eye for an eye, poetic justice. Flashbacks to my own termination, in both lives, played in my mind. The coldness of the HR drone, Vanessa's false sympathy, the crushing weight of injustice. I remembered the despair, the hopelessness, the feeling of being utterly disposable. Could I inflict that on someone else, even Vanessa? I discussed it with Dev. We were in my new, spacious CEO office at the main Technova campus. Marcus Wright's old office, ironically. So, what are you going to do? Dev asked, swirling the coffee in his mug. About Vanessa. I don't know, I confessed, staring out at the panoramic city view that had once seemed so impossibly distant. Part of me wants to crush her, make her feel even a fraction of what I felt. Revenge, Dev said softly, not judgmentally, just stating a fact. Would it make you feel better? Would it complete the circle? That was the question, wasn't it? Would revenge truly satisfy me? Or would it just perpetuate the cycle of toxicity, of power misused? Had I fought so hard to escape becoming a victim, only to become a different kind of perpetrator? I thought about the core values I'd just espoused for the new company. Integrity, respect, ethical conduct. Firing Vanessa out of pure vengeance, even if she deserved it, felt dissonant. It felt like something the old Vanessa would do. I've been thinking about what kind of leader I want to be, Dev, I said slowly. What kind of company we want to build. Is it one that's founded on retribution or on something more? You've already won, Sarah, Dev said gently. You got your justice. You exposed her. You reclaimed your work. You built something incredible from the ashes. What more do you need to prove? He was right. My victory wasn't about Vanessa's ultimate fate. It was about my own transformation, about the company I was building, about the future I was creating. But still, she had caused so much pain to me, to others. Could I just let that go unaddressed? The decision weighed heavily on me. It wasn't just about Vanessa, it was about defining who I was. Now that I had the power I'd once craved, the power that had once been used to destroy me. Was I just a mirror image of my tormentor, or had I truly broken the cycle? I called Vanessa to my office a week later. Not the dreary satellite office, but my main office, the seat of power. She walked in hesitantly, her face pale, her eyes downcast. She looked smaller, diminished, stripped of her usual confidence. She clearly expected the worst: termination, humiliation. "Please sit down, Vanessa," I said, my voice neutral. She perched on the edge of the expensive leather chair, looking like a frightened bird. She had a folder in her lap, presumably her defense, her plea, her arguments. "I know why I'm here," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "And I just want to say," I held up a hand, cutting her off gently. "Vanessa, before you say anything, I want to tell you my decision." She braced herself, her knuckles white as she gripped the folder. "I'm not going to fire you." The words hung in the air. She looked up, stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief. You're not." "No," I said. "Firing you would be too easy. It would be an ending. And I don't think it would change anything. Not really. Not for you, not for this company." A flicker of hope, quickly followed by confusion, crossed her face. "Then, what?" "I'm offering you a different path, Vanessa," I said, leaning forward. "A path to accountability. A path to, perhaps, redemption. If you choose to take it." I laid it out. She would keep her administrative job for now, but she would also be required to do several things. Firstly, she would write a formal, detailed letter of apology to every individual at Technova whose work she had stolen or whose career she had sabotaged. Not a generic corporate apology, but a personal, specific acknowledgement of her actions and their impact. Those letters would be reviewed by me and by legal counsel. Secondly, she would be assigned to mentor a group of junior developers, particularly young women in tech, under strict supervision. She would be tasked with genuinely helping them navigate their careers, protect their intellectual property, and understand the importance of ethical conduct. She would have to teach them the very lessons she herself had so spectacularly failed to learn. Her performance would be closely monitored. Thirdly, if she wished to ever advance beyond her current administrative role, she would have to do so through actual verifiable work and contribution. No manipulation, no shortcuts. She would have to earn respect slowly, genuinely, through merit. "This isn't a punishment, Vanessa," I explained, my voice even. "Though I imagine parts of it will feel that way to you. This is a chance to confront what you did, to understand its consequences, and to perhaps start to rebuild something resembling a professional reputation, based on actual substance, not on smoke and mirrors." She stared at me, speechless. This was not what she had expected. This was harder, more complex than simple termination. This required introspection, humility, genuine effort. "Why?" she finally choked out. "After everything I did to you, why would you offer me this?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the monster who had haunted my past. I saw a broken, flawed human being, one who had made terrible choices, but who was now being offered a different one. "Because, Vanessa," I said softly, "someone once gave me a second chance. A chance to do things differently. And I learned that true strength isn't about perpetuating cycles of harm. It's about breaking them." The choice was hers. She could resign, she could refuse, or she could take the difficult, humbling path I was offering. I had made my decision. I had chosen not revenge, but a more challenging, more meaningful form of justice. I had chosen to be the leader I wished I'd had. I had chosen to break the cycle.